Welcome to Elevate Your Event, your favorite podcast for transforming fundraising events. Join us weekly for expert tips and creative ideas to make your next event a standout success.
Welcome back to Elevate Your Event. In today's episode, we're chatting with Adam Levy, founder of Red Rooster Group. He's got some fantastic advice on how to make your events more powerful using storytelling and smart strategy. We'll talk about how to connect with donors, keep them engaged, and make sure your events have a lasting impact. Let's get into it.
Hey, well, welcome back to the Elevate Your Event podcast. We talk about all the various ways you can make your next fundraising event better, or even just make your marketing and your messaging better. So we've got a special guest today. We've got Adam Levy, not to be confused with Howard Levy, although maybe this guy here also plays the harmonica. And if he does, I want you to whip it out anytime you want, Howard, and start playing us a tune.
That would be nice. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
And we've got the beautiful, gorgeous Inga Weiss.
Thank you.
Yes.
One and only.
So what are we here to talk about today? So Howard, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what the Red Rooster Group does, and then let's just dive into talking about marketing and all the other great stuff.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the nonprofit sector pretty much my entire career. I decided to dedicate my professional life to supporting the small and medium organizations who really need the help. I started 30 years ago. I looked around. I saw, at the time, actually, there were about half the amount of organizations there are now in the country, about 600 to 800,000. There's now almost 1.5 million or so. And it's a competitive world out there, and nonprofits really need all the help they can to tell their story. So I started Red Rooster Group to wake up your brand and catalyze your fundraising and help organizations get out there, tell the story so they can reach more people and, accomplish their mission, essentially. So I've looking forward to a conversation, talked with hundreds of organizations of all sizes and help with different kinds of challenges on how you could distinguish your organization to, you're using events as part of your strategic plan for fundraising, to overall marketing, communications, and storytelling, all the things you need to galvanize people to your cause.
Right. And it makes sense, and it's interesting because we always talk about how charities have this unique power, called a superpower, because they get to, basically market to or tell their story to a captive audience who actually pays them to do it. And so you got to have that one shot, though, right? I mean, you've got that one opportunity. You've got, I don't know how many, say 100, 200, 300, 400 people in that room, and they're listening to what you're saying. So how do you maximize that when you're working with these clients? How do you help them understand, like, how do I take the best advantage, of that particular event in that audience?
Yeah, well, I want to, maybe I could circle back to that, because I think it's important to understand the role that the events play in your fundraising. Because, many organizations have events, and some have questioned them, at least after, COVID. We can't do in-person stuff, and going to online and bringing them back. And, what's the real purpose? And, are we still raising money? But there are other reasons, you can have events. I mean, as you say, it's in person. If you're doing in person, people do online stuff also. There's a great reason to actually, a great way to stay in touch with your donors and actually talk to them and hear what their concerns are. What do they think about your organization? What's valuable about it? What are their motives for supporting it? And what's going on in their life? A lot of organizations that talk about, like, how do we tell our story? How do we reach our donors? I'm like, you got to ask them. And in-person events are a great way to actually do that. Hear what their concerns are. Now it's a political season. There's a big election going on. What are people doing? Are they going to be supporting candidates? Is their money going to be going into that and at the exclusion of your cause, or other causes, or is it not going to make a difference? Is who the winner going to decide on some of their causes they're going to be challenging, doubling down on some or pulling back? What impact is that going to have? So events are a great way to learn about your audience and also to cultivate the relationship. You're there to, to pave the way for an ongoing relationship and not just see it as a one-time cash cow. We put all this effort in, we had the event, we raised X amount of money, and, we'll see you next year. But, how do you actually get to know the donors so that you can open the door to the next conversation with them? particularly ones that you don't know. You may have regular donors, but others bring their spouses, their friends, their business colleagues, and others. So you're getting in front of new people, and I find often there's like a lost opportunity there to actually even capture the name. Sometimes buy a table, for 10 people. They just buy the table, and you don't even know who's there.
I know.
Right.
And we have that debate a lot with our clients, reminding them of what you just said, which is that this is the entry point to a relationship with somebody, and it's hard to have a relationship with somebody if you don't get their name at the door, right? Because you're too worried. And look, maybe in some cases the sponsor's just not providing those names, but when those people walk in the door, we've got to make it, as a collective here, we've got to make a concerted effort to figure out who's coming to my event and how do I stay in touch with them, right?
Yeah, how do you keep your donors engaged in between your 2 annual galas?
Right. You have 2 annual galas?
Like between...
You're hardcore. Oh, you mean you have one gala.
1 annual gala. How do you keep your donors engaged for the rest of the year?
It's in the afternoon here in Colorado. Look, I'm catching up with you.
It's almost a happy hour.
2 annual galas. I was about ready to,
That'd be nice.
But many years have smaller events in between the major event. You have the cocktail thing, you have the bar thing. You may have a walk or a bike run, or a bike, or run or whatever, other kind of outdoor event or things like that. So there are these other kind of touch points. But you do want to know, to your point, Inga, you want to know who you're reaching. Is this really to cultivate your deeper relationships with your current donors and get them to step up at a higher level of support? Because that's one kind of an event versus bringing in new people, which is slightly different. What you're going to say at the event is more introductory to the cause, to the issue, showing the real need versus, a donor that you have that already understands you. You're going to go into a different type of story in a deeper levels, and you're going to structure the event differently. You're going to have lower, probably lower entry barrier so that you can, just get more people in, right? Expose them. You have more ways of bringing, buying multiple tickets or group sales or whatever it is, to try to encourage, people. The way you promote it is going to be different. So understanding who you're going to reach is really one of the starting points there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And you'll cater to that event. If you get younger people, then they may not want to be sitting down at a round table for an hour and a half listening to stuff. So.
As long as you don't let them do silent disco party.
I know. The attention span of people. Look, you bring up a point, right? I mean, the attention span of people through the generations is getting shorter, right? So factor all those things in, right, when you're talking about how you are actually going to engage with them at this event.
Yeah, and how do you bring in community? How do you, make this, if that's something that you want to do, is really, if you're a local organization, you want to elevate your profile in the community. How do you invite the businesses in? How do you invite other nonprofits even, or foundations or others who are kind of part of your world, into this as sponsors or as speakers or as part of the program, in some way, or as part of the attendee, inviting them to, we had a group that was promoting an event, reached out to the faith-based community, and leaders who had, could then reach out to their congregation, to invite people in. So you're trying to find ways to open your doors to the community and, and bring people in if that's one of the goals.
Right.
I think creatively about all the contacts that you have within the organization, and at the board level, at the staff level, at the line staff level, at your clients, may know, people or have worlds of opportunity that, that they're, involved in, particularly if you're going to have them as a speaker, or part of the program, in some way. So, there's a lot that can be done to think creatively about those things, but it starts with kind of the strategy, right? Who do we want to bring in, and what's the purpose, of this event?
Right. So are you helping people just kind of refine that because, your clients kind of know what the strategy is? Are you helping them develop the strategy, or how does that work? I mean, we run into a number of nonprofits who I think are not entirely, I think they know what they want to accomplish at the event, but I don't think they really understand how to do it. You know what I'm saying? How.
And they focus on the wrong things a lot of times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is really figuring out where this fits in your overall, revenue, So if you think of a pie chart of all the revenue that the organization brings in, I'll make it very simple. A small organization, $1 million, right? Where is that coming from? Is it half from the government? Is it from how much from private individuals versus foundations versus corporate support. So and where is the real opportunity? If you say the opportunity is with individuals and it is with events, and you may say, foundations, we have an issue that could really be supported. Let's hire a grant writer and, amplify that. But if you're committed to, individuals, then it's like, are we going to grow, the higher level base and say, of those, if we can get another 10%, 20%, 30% over this year, over next year, how are we going to do that? And versus try to bring more people in an acquisition strategy, which is getting tougher these days. What role does the event play? How much are we going to make off of this event? How much is it going to cost? And how much do we want to invest then in the future lifetime value of these larger donors?
Right.
So that should be the first questions that you ask when you're planning this out. So when you're selecting the venue or you're determining a budget for a speaker, or, maybe you don't have a budget for a speaker, whether you should have a budget, for different things to, be attracting people, to come to the event. It's helpful to look at what's worth investing in, just as you.
I think it's a good point. Because we look at it as on the business side of things, there's a term called cost of customer acquisition, right? Or customer acquisition cost, right? And you're looking at what through my sales and marketing efforts do I need to spend to acquire one more customer? And then you can look at a return on that based on kind of what the lifetime value is. And it's not that much different here. And we talk to a lot of our clients around when they're thinking about events and to your point, like what do they cost or where do I want to spend money? For us, we look at that and say, okay, so if this is an entry point, if you're acquiring donors, if this is a channel for that, right, where you're getting and acquiring new donors into here, what elements of that are actually going to promote or generate the relationship with additional donors, and which costs probably don't matter, whether it might be an entertainment fee or particular venue or whatever. So we try to help our customers see that and figure that out, that, to us, because we're a cost element, right? But we see ourselves as more of a profit center or an investment element, because for companies like Handbid, we're helping you acquire donors and we're helping you build a relationship with them. And if that's one of the key elements of your event, right. Yes, you want to raise money. Yes, you want them to donate. Those are all things that are true. But at the same time, I think a lot gets lost in the tracking of, well, how many new donors did I get? Or how many new names went into my contact database, not because they raised their hand in a paddle raise, but because they donated or bought something in an auction or something.
Yeah. And I mean, we go to a lot of fundraising events, and we do see a lot how some organizations and some event planners have enormous budget for flower arrangements and live entertainment that probably is not really generating return on investment. It's like some of it is misguided.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun. It's so fun to go to a party, but sometimes the main focus and mission, like, why are we here? Why are we here? We're here to raise money. Gets lost in translation a little bit.
Like the centerpiece is on this table at this event I was at, where it prevented me from seeing the stage or the screen.
Yeah. that I see as a problem, for us to be able to raise money.
I know. It's like, can I move this thing?
I don't know if you are ready to dive into, I'm totally taking over this podcast, into psychology of fundraising. But I do have a question, like, what are your tips and tricks on using your storytelling, your mission moment, like during event and during the year? Like, how do you use that effectively to attract new donors or maintain your donors, keep them engaged?
Or grow them.
Grow them.
Yeah. I want to reflect, I'm going to tell you that. I want to reflect on what you just said in terms of the event outcome. I call it the water cooler test from, back in the days when people went to an office, and the next day you're gathering around the water cooler and like, what'd you do, last night?
Yeah.
And you want them to, you don't want them to say, well, I went to this event and, it was like this wine tasting and there's like great wines there. You want them to say they were moved by your mission and that hey, you should get involved. This is a great organization. This is if you're concerned about whatever this is, the kids or kittens or homelessness or cancer or whatever it is, this organization is making a real impact. You should check it out. That's what you want to have happen at the end, as a result. Obviously, the donations and the participation. I'm saying the carry-away effect, that you can achieve by people going out into the world then as your ambassadors after your event, should not be lost on you as a goal for the event. So I was also going to mention the idea of putting together create a brief for events. If your organization doesn't do that, is really think about, even if you're doing it, so the 6th year in a row that you're doing your annual gala, it's kind of helpful to just sit down and rethink, what you're doing, or at least question some of the assumptions. You're talking about costs and spending on, flowers or various expenses, but, even more fundamentally, great, what do we want to get out of this? And that would help to, answer those questions. So
what do we want to get out of there, and what do we need to start recognizing might actually investing deeper in, right? That's going to take us to a new level.
Yeah, I mean, the Handbid and the technologies are going to, facilitate fundraising, that are going to facilitate capturing of information, and then how you use it after. I'd rather see you get some good information that's captured and think about the day after the event and the week after, and then the month after, and then the year cycle after. So you have 100 people there, 500 people, however many it is. What happens? How are all the information, how much information, can you capture? And then how can you use that in a fruitful way for you? So you're not just they're dropped in a database and they're just getting your newsletter, but they showed up for
That's
you.
right.
Yeah.
I think you forget that, right? I mean, I think we forget how much for a lot of people it is of a sacrifice of their time and their effort to just show up at your event. I mean, they've made quite an effort, whether it's babysitter, dressing up, driving somewhere, whatever it is. That's a huge testament.
And a commitment, because most of the people, have some kind of budget, and it's a commitment. Most of us support few different organizations, and we can be very choosy where our money goes.
That's right. So that donor appreciation, is a big part of that. And crafting the creative brief and planning out the event, that should be a part of it. What are we going to do to show the donors who came, or even the attendees who didn't come, that we appreciate them coming and that we want to have a relationship with them, that we understood some of hopefully we're talking a little bit and we understood some of their, concerns or what they're interested in. How can we use a couple of data collection points even when they're registering, or one question even after the event on their way out, multiple choice thing, what was the most salient thing, A, B, or C? Collect some information that you could use to start that or continue the relationship with.
Absolutely.
Love it. So talk to us. I mean, we're dying. I mean, Inga's been asking this question all day because, she's an auctioneer, and so she gets this question a lot, which is, how do we maximize the event? How do we maximize, whether it's the story part, the presentation, you name it. We don't want to fill in the blanks for you, so just kind of give our audience some wisdom here on how to best maximize this event.
Well, a couple of things. One is, not everyone who's there may understand what your organization does, or even the issue or the nuance, of what you're doing. So make that clear. It's not always evident. People in the organization often make assumptions, about it. Even, the name of the organization, people may just be getting an invite to come in as someone's guest or whatever. So that you don't want to lose the opportunity to talk to people who are not there. And by the way, you don't want to lose the opportunity to communicate to people who are even not coming. So, if you have a room of 300 and you're sending out, 1,200 invitations, probably a good return rate, again, 1 out of 4. But that leaves a lot of people who are not going to be coming, who are still receiving your communication. And if it just says, the spring fling, for, Aces Club, whatever, no one knows what Aces, they may not know what Aces Club is. Spring fling doesn't say anything.
Right.
So use the communication about your event to actually impart something about what you're doing. I think that's one tip. So at the event, make it really clear what you do. Make the problem or the cause really salient, really clear. So your speakers, should if they're experiencing, the issue, and they can share their vulnerability about the before state.
Right.
There's a lot of, rah good feelings about the after, I've come through, I'm a success, full, whatever organization it is, you've programmed, you've come through and you've gotten the help. But the real magic is in the transformation that someone experiences.
Okay.
And being able to share the vulnerability of, this might be the lowest part in their life or most difficult or challenging decision, that they faced or some circumstance that, we do not want to face ourselves. So how are we living through that persons to understand, and really feel that emotional heartache and despair or whatever the situation is, so that when we hear the story, we're really moved, emotionally. I mean, that's the magic of being in these events, is hearing firsthand from someone who can share that emotional, journey and move you along. And then that's the moment to ask for the donations when people are, really feeling it.
Right. And I've seen that work really well. And then I've seen such a missed opportunity. Like, I've seen really powerful stories, whether they're on video or on stage, disconnected
and
from
falls flat.
Yeah, because then
It
sometimes
doesn't connect with the room.
Well, it's not that it might connect with the room, but it's like you still have to give them the step 1, 2, 3 on now how do you help, right? And I've seen so many people okay, well, this is the time where now you're going to give. But sometimes I like to see it connected to, okay, so here's a family that, this organization has completely transformed. And so we're raising money tonight for these particular programs or something like that. Can you donate
That's
or
right.
support?
I think the nature of the role of the organization in that story and the success story has to be clear.
Right.
So the person is empowered, they're doing it themselves, or by their own will, gumption and so forth. But with the empowerment, with the tools, with the space provided, with the, the mental, the support, or whatever it is that the organization provided, and making that clear. And then, to your point, Jeff, of connecting that to the donor opportunity at that, at that moment. So with your, by supporting, that, more caseworkers or more open space or, another classroom for the kids or whatever it is, that could empower more people to be able to have that kind of success.
Absolutely.
I agree. Just let's take something generic, right? So you take First Responders Foundation, right? You show these, people that were first responders and, this organization, if it wasn't for this organization, these things wouldn't be possible. Well, what things weren't possible, and what specifically did they do? Did they just give you money, or did they run you through a program, or did they take you on a retreat to work on PTSD issues? Sometimes I think those little nuances get lost, and it's okay, well, I don't know what they did. Maybe they just, I don't know, maybe they just wrote up a check or something. I don't know. So I think there you can really, those types of connections work for, at least in my brain, they work that way, because now I see, I got it. Yeah. That's what this organization does. They fund grants, or they fund, PTSD recovery retreats or whatever it might be, or they, respite care for families of, disabled children or something, right? So,
yeah.
And I mean, if I may, sorry to interrupt, Howard.
Go ahead.
If I may, I want to use this one example. We work with this organization that their event raises money for veterans and first responders with PTSDs. Mm-hmm. And you go to this event and they make it very clear that, okay, so every $10,000 that you donate, every single one of you, every $5,000 you donate, will take one veteran on a motorcycle ride across these 3 states as PTSD therapy.
I love it.
And people love it. People love it. You're ready to open your wallet because you're opening your heart. It's so powerful.
And I see that, that's my point. And,
and it's a specific example.
And I've seen really good benefit auctioneers or MCs do that.
Yeah.
Right? Where they make that connection.
Yeah.
$5,000, feeds 25 families. Something like that.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. The greater connection you can make to people, the better. I mean, even to the extent of helping people to understand what it's like in that situation. What would you do if you lost your home? What would you do if you lost, your legs, like these veterans? What would you do? Is there an organization? You turn to your family, your faith, like what do you do? What do you do for your job? And what happens to your income, then your kids, and childcare, then if you're home so I think if you can prompt people to imagine themselves in the situation, then you create the connection for them to have the empathy. And that's really powerful. There's you asked about the behavioral science and, psychology. There's this principle of loss aversion, where people are more scared of losing something, than of gaining something. And so many organizations talk about, the positive benefits of their program, which is great. We're helping, these people to get ahead. We're saving the environment, this tract of land, the animals, et cetera. But the opposite of that is what's lost without our organization, right? Where would you be, without us? And specifically if you're unique in your community and there is no other organization, doing that, then there's a clear harm that's going to happen. And making that real evident is a powerful motivator, for people. And so asking them, if you lost your home or or your legs or your, whatever it is, and there is no, and we're not here, what are you doing? You'd have to you go to 6 other places and it would take you 6 months to figure it out and wait for the government to come in and, there's a problem. Now you're showing the real problem that is being addressed, through the lens of that loss rather than just, here's all the great things, that we are doing now. It's easier.
Right. I love that idea. And look, I mean, it's a difficult message to send sometimes, but I agree with you. It's powerful. We had a client once and I want to say this is years ago. I think they were called like Platoon 22 or something because every 22 minutes a veteran was taking their life. And so their whole organization was built around, PTSD and suicide prevention amongst vets. And they built you don't have to change your organization's name to something that communicates the loss, but just taking that theme and driving that theme home with certain people, I think is powerful. And for these guys, as soon as they explained what their name meant, they had people on board.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is powerful.
This idea of attracting, of kind of reframing your issue, is interesting. We were working with an organization working with people with disabilities, and we were doing research on this, and we found this instance of an organization, I think it was in England, that reframed I think it was dyslexia, could be mistaken, and they had prominent people who had dyslexia who were now, Steve Jobs, and I don't want to misspeak about Steven Spielberg, but other, really famous people. And they rented a small storefront, and they put the posters up with all these people in it. And I forgot the name of the storefront, but, something about, being dyslexic, I believe. And they just stopped people kind of in the street and said, would you like to have dyslexia? And they're like, what are you talking about? Of course I wouldn't want to. Let me show you something. Step over here, and you see this, come into our office, this little storefront, and they just showed all the people, and they talked about all their, and you're, all of a sudden, like, holy crap, maybe that was a driver for them. They had to overcome the challenge of not being able to read in school, and they were ostracized, or they had to compensate in some other way and develop a new kind of skill, and they made it to the top of their profession, and that's kind of what drove them and motivated them. And so it was so eye-opening for people to experience a total reframe of something that they felt, was negative, and have more empathy now and understanding, for people who do have, this condition.
Right.
And so I think there's an opportunity for organizations, specifically at events, because people are there,
right,
to think really creatively, think, out of the box. Like, what assumptions do people have about us, about our cause, about the people we're serving, or our community, or the issue? And how could we help them re-understand it, in a new, and different way.
Right.
And just come up with some interesting ways like that, that are unexpected and maybe even delightful, that create that memorable experience, that help to, educate, and they connect to your cause. They understand it in a different way. They have more empathy. And now you're driving, just paving the pathway for their support.
Right.
And for their kind of evangelism in a way of this can be a pillow talk, conversation, or at the office the next day. Do you know that these guys were all, dyslexic?
Right.
And
Right.
I didn't freaking know that. And I was like, oh yeah, my daughter's, dyslexic. I didn't and now you started like a conversation, about this.
And you start connecting. That's the thing too, right? Because once people feel like they've got a personal or kind of a close connection to something, they can draw that line. It's like, now I feel it or I see it. And so my daughter has a very rare disorder. Not as rare once you once you've lived around it for a while, you start to notice. It's kind of like when you buy a car, you start noticing this car that you bought all over the highway.
Everywhere.
Right? So it's kind of that thing. But either way, it's like, the people that have really connected an organization, because raising money for a rare disease is hard, right? Because people don't have that direct connection. But the ones that meet her or the ones that come into our lives who immediately get involved are the ones that have a connection through a family member or a friend to another individual that has the same disorder. And so 100% agree with you. That connection absolutely helps. It makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. That's usually how these, are through the people who have the connection, direct connection to the cause in some way. So many organizations have that challenge of widening the base to people. So that's why I thought that dyslexic one was interesting, because it was just out on the street, man on the street, pull you in.
Yeah.
But even if you don't have, I do have relatives with dyslexia, and I have a really close high school friend that had it. But outside of that, everybody knows who Steve Jobs is, right? Everybody knows who Steven Spielberg is. So you are still drawing those connections.
Yeah.
Right. I think it works. That's very cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Question you have is what else could you do, I guess, or what, we try to think creatively and propose, we had proposed to that organization. We had the disability organization had proposed a film festival of existing films. You can gather. We looked at influencers on YouTube who were doing really interesting things to share their story and pull together some of the best, of these things. They didn't decide to do that. But you don't have to, for an event, when you're thinking about, what an event can be, you can think creatively. For that homeless organization, we pitched an idea that it also was not done, but we thought it was kind of creative. In the Silicon Valley area, there's tons of people living on the streets and encampments and in their cars. And that's highly evident. And there's a huge gap between the haves and the have-nots there. The wealth inequality is just, crazy. So to kind of tie those things together, we said, let's do a sleep-in, at Facebook's parking lot, set up a stage, you have the speakers, but then, you stay in your car, you sleep in your car, and you're kind of getting a taste of what it's like not to be in your home, at least for one night, and without the things that you would normally have available, to you.
Yeah.
Or taking a bus tour of the different sites, and taking the people out into the field, into the world, going to see the different places that you're helping to create a change in. So just thinking about how you can engage people in seeing and tasting and, all the experiential senses rather than just being, a captive audience, in a room.
Oh, it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation. So do you have any parting words of advice for our listeners? That would be awesome. Love for you to share that. And then also share with everybody how they can get in touch with the Red Rooster Group if they want to have you come out, maybe help them make their next event that much better.
Yeah, sure. My tip would be, we talked about a lot of things, could be very overwhelming, but pick one thing that is measurable that you can do so that you can see the effect that it has had. And that just gives you more wherewithal to ask for the budget to do more things next time, to demonstrate some effectiveness, at doing something. And maybe it's through the connection of, capturing information and using information. How are you going to communicate the donor appreciation in cultivation? That's probably what I would, recommend if you're ongoing with your, event and you don't have the wherewithal to reimagine everything. At least try to maximize that part of it. You can reach us at redroostergroup.com. And find me on LinkedIn, the Howard Adam Levy, LinkedIn /
So do you work with clients all over the world, all over the country? Kind of what's the scope of your business?
Yeah, we do. You typically, all over the country. We have worked with others in Europe, 30 years experience, mostly up to like $1 million to $100 million, $1 million to $100 million, sometimes a little above $100 million. But we typically we're a great resource for those smaller groups, and typically in like the 5 to 20 million that are looking for strategy to understand the bigger picture and how to organize their internal resources effectively, find the means to money the fastest way,
right,
and to put into practice the best practices that they may not have. Because it's tough you're small, you don't have all the staff, the technology, so to really maximize your effectiveness and really kind of get you to the next level.
Totally makes sense. I love it. It's been
too.
Really, really fascinating.
We could talk for hours.
I know. And we love metrics and measurements. So ending on that is a great way to say, go out there and measure something. And it doesn't always just have to be your top line, guys. I mean, it doesn't have to be your costs. I'm not saying that you shouldn't watch your costs. I'm just saying maybe there's some other metrics out there, like how many new donors did I introduce to my organization through this event? Exactly. Right?
You could ask their joy. I mean, even ask a question, how much did you just enjoy this, event?
Right.
Yes. Love it.
You don't forget the role of bringing some magic into people's lives.
Totally agree. Well, Howard, this has been amazing. I know our listeners really do appreciate all your wisdom. And so, again, redroostergroup.com if they want to reach you. All right, we'll give them a check out until we're going to go ahead and wrap up this podcast. Until next time, happy fundraising.
Thank you. Till next time.
If you enjoyed our show, please take a moment to leave us a review. You can find us on Apple, Google, and Spotify. Don't forget to subscribe for more great content. And if you're a fan of video, check us out on YouTube. Until next time, happy fundraising.